Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered, your go-to source for industry insights and wealth creation. Stay ahead of the curve with a thorough breakdown of market trends, financial developments, and the impact of current events on your wealth building strategy. We deliver the latest updates and essential insights into the financial world through expert interviews and detailed analysis. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wealth Unfiltered. I'm Samantha Parinello, and I'm your host. Today, I'm joined by my resident guest expert, Chris Parinello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we're very excited. We're actually doing this live from Vegas, but that's actually not the important part. It's actually where we came from. This year, this week, we just went to the annual BEC, Best Ever Conference, held in Salt Lake City. So we flew in last night, and we really enjoyed the conference. There was a lot of wonderful takeaways. But the most exciting thing was we got to see a debate on stage by Marcus and Millichap's John Chang, as well as Neil Bawa. So before we get into that, we're also going to let you know that some more exciting things are coming on the show. We're going to be discussing President Trump's big discussion last night, and we are very excited to get started. So as we mentioned, we were at the Best Ever Conference in Salt Lake City, but I'm sure there's many people out there who don't know what that is. So Chris, why don't you give everyone an overview of what Best Ever Conference is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Best Ever Conference is it's the marketing arm of a big real estate sponsor, Ashcroft Capital. And Joe Fairless basically separated out this conference company within his broader real estate companies. And it really is built for people that are actively trying to do real estate, people that are active and passive investors to go and learn from great minds. They do a lot of public speaking on stage, talking about market outlook. And then you have, booths from service providers and other sponsors, and LPs and GPs, get a chance to meet face to face, go to a lot of different events and really learn more about where the industry's going, where it's been, and just incredibly valuable in-person event to really move forward any agenda you have in the multifamily space or the broader commercial real estate space.
Yeah. No, we really enjoyed it. The reason we were there was because our Viking team was there. So Chris was representing the IR team. He had two other people with him from his team. And then myself and the director of marketing were also there. It was really exciting because we had our own booth and we were really able to connect with so many people. And I think one of the cool parts about this was that not only, like you mentioned, with LP investors, making potential new and partnerships, but we have a ton of existing partnerships with other sponsors who were there. So getting FaceTime with those people and really building those relationships that we already have and nurturing those were really, I think, for me, the best part. I really, really enjoy getting to have the face-to-face time. And then the very first night, we actually hosted a kickoff event, which was the pre-party to the big party for the evening. And that was extremely successful. It was a really, really wonderful time, live music, cocktails, hors d'oeuvres. And I really enjoyed getting to get a little bit more intimate with everybody, really learning their backstories. And it wasn't just so about what they do for a living, but we really got to know the people behind it all.
Exactly. And real estate remains a relationship business. So the true ROI of going to an event like Best Ever is the people that you meet, strengthening the relationship. And really, it's the jumping off point of finding ways to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole team benefited from being there, and it was really a wonderful experience. But we did mention that there was a very, very heated debate that was really exciting. And so the debate that was, the question in debate really was, has there been a soft landing, and has a new real estate cycle begun? And so the people who said yes, they were given their position. So they didn't get to pick their position. They were told a week out what their position must be, and then their jobs were to convince the entire audience, about a couple hundred people who decided to watch the debate, to either shift from what they initially had thought and take on their point of view, or to completely just give all the information and sway people who maybe were really uncertain in the audience. So they did a poll at the very beginning, and I think it was 50% of people thought that we had a soft landing, or at least the real estate cycle had already begun. And then there was about 36% of the people who said absolutely not, we're waiting for the recession to hit us. This is still, we're not there yet. And then there was, I think, almost 20%. Or there was
undecided.
Yeah, there was some percentage. Math isn't my thing. Sorry about that. But there was actually a large group of people who just said, I don't know, and I'm waiting for the debate to really get my information. So it was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and it
was really well moderated.
It was very well moderated. Neil did an exceptional job. They did the opening arguments, and I really, really enjoyed the fact that he was so charismatic, that he had really prepared for his point. And whether or not you thought that there had been a soft landing, which that was his point, was saying yes there was, he really did a good job of making sure that if you didn't agree with him, then you were a doomsdayer.
Right, no, exactly. And I think that's what made it, kind of exciting. Healthy debate, takes you back to when you were in high school.
Absolutely.
And, whether you're on one position or another, a good debate starts with a question that isn't easily answered.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, the for the soft landing folks were at a little bit of a disadvantage, because by definition, a soft landing, it would be, and John leaned into this. He's like, technically, we haven't gotten there because we haven't hit our inflation goals. So he's like, we're teetering around. It's not that it's not possible, but it's a no landing situation, which it was really hard to argue the other point. And I think Neil and his partner did a fantastic job using comedy, and calling them doomsdayers and really making it like a fun experience. But I think
they also used a lot of data that they could, points that they could prove.
And that's the thing, is I think what I learned from Neil's side of the argument is we very well could hit a soft landing. We might be on the way to a soft landing. And he had a lot of data, and that's his background is, they call him the scientist of data scientist of real estate, and he's kind of a tech executive that started a real estate company, Grow Capitalist. So he really was prepared with data, really eloquent speech, really funny, but to the point. And I'm on record here saying that a soft landing is just prolonged pain. So I thought the broader question was, do we even want a soft landing? That wasn't really getting answered there. But I think both sides did a really good job, and it was probably my favorite part of the conference.
It was definitely my favorite part, and I feel like the part that was hard for me, I always have an opinion, so there was moments where they would say something, and it would click something in my mind, and all I wanted to do was shout out to them and be like, oh yeah, well what about this? Yeah. Oh yeah, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not participating, I'm just supposed to sit here and watch,
Right.
But it was really great because I felt like if there were people in the room who didn't know, maybe they have opinions, or, some of them said they didn't have an opinion at all, but I felt like you would have left there with so much information, because they talked about so much about inflation, about whether, like you were talking about specifically about the soft landing. They even brought the price of eggs up, and it was a full array of information that you could have wanted, with true data that was actually very current. They were pulling numbers from things that were going on that same day.
Right.
And I felt like it was so valuable.
Right. All in a backdrop of the tariffs going into effect that afternoon, the Dow just getting tanked, and Treasury yields massively dropping, and they're making this argument about a soft landing. Is actually quite funny.
Yes. Well, and as the lead economist for Marcus and Millichap, John Chang, he knows this stuff like the back of his hands. And so when he's up on stage, it was very, very funny, because his facial expressions were he's looking over the other team you have got to be kidding me. You are not saying this to me. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. And I think the crowd did. I definitely feel like everybody was fully engaged. And you could see the room went from being I don't know, maybe 70, 80 people, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. By the end, it was a packed space, and everybody was involved, and it felt really good. But I will say that at the end of it all, John Chang took it home for the win, and it was a really fun experience. But I think that the numbers don't lie, and it was very clear that the soft landing hasn't happened yet. And I think that was something that we've, walking into seeing that President Trump was going to speak last night, we had been talking about all of these things, even walking into the conference, just a few days ago. And there are just what I keep finding about everybody's political agenda, it doesn't matter what side of the, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, everybody is so short-minded and short-sighted. And what I mean by that is I keep seeing all of this rhetoric about one piece of the puzzle. And it doesn't matter which one. It doesn't matter if you're talking about tariffs or if you're talking about interest rates or inflation or whatever you're talking about. Whatever the topic is, every single person, they will die on that grave. They just go into that one thing and they're like, this is going to cause all of this, or no, this is going to do this and this is how it's going to work. And I'm not an economist, and I am not the person who is whatever she says, it needs to be the thing. But I feel like I'm extremely intelligent, and what I really, really do is I like to hear the sides of everybody, and I like to take what everyone says with a grain of salt, but then I also look at where do the facts overlap and what is the data showing me, and to look and not actually have everything in front of you and just say the one piece of this economic puzzle is what's going to happen makes me crazy. And
Right.
you hear it all over the media, you hear it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, patience is key in anything that you do, and looking at all the information. One of our team members at Viking that was there with us is our youngest associate. He's
Yes.
22 years old, and he's learning, and this is a good time for me to get FaceTime with him. He's asking me tons of questions, and he was asking me over breakfast, he said, what do you do every day? How do you get information? Like, who do you trust? And I explained to him, I was like, I generally am skeptical with anything I hear, but I want to hear everything.
Absolutely.
So I want to hear everything, and I want to use what I've learned in my background in real estate and private equity to figure out what I think people have right and what I think people have wrong. And I'm not always right, but I will make a decision on my own based off of the information that I think is logical. And I think logic and common sense sometimes goes out the window because a lot of people just repeat what they hear. And they don't really think about why that person might have an agenda or how it better serves them for that information to be right. And that's something that I want all of the people that I'm mentoring to think about. Even me, I'm always going to have a little bit more of a bullish take on multifamily because I manage investor relations for a multifamily firm, and I want it to do well, and I'm looking for ways to protect ourselves, but also ways to grow.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you should know that, when you hear me speak, I'm you double check and maybe hear somebody in hospitality is going to be really bullish on hospitality because they truly believe the fundamentals of that asset class, and just take everything that someone says and then do your own research and come up with what you think is right.
So, I was mentioning media, right? We flip through every single station. We are not the people who are we have to be tied to one side of the aisle, right? We're just not those people. We really do want to lead our lives with the most information and then let that be our guide. So we watch all the different stations, but the thing that I don't understand is how either side can sit there and then ridicule each other as if it was truth, and then try to take away merit from something someone's saying when it's factual by then trying to just attack a human or attack a cause, but it has nothing to do with the data or it has nothing to do with the facts. And then those people are being streamed on television where they're literally incepting the young American's mind, people who are just not maybe not looking for the truth and just willing to just take what they hear as gospel. It really bothers me. Yeah. But in addition to it bothering me, I don't understand how it's something that, as an owner of that network, I would allow. Everybody has free speech, blah, blah, blah. But free speech should also be that if you are the news and the word is news, that you should have some type of true source. It shouldn't be just banter and someone's opinion. That's what talk shows like this are for.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's why a good old-fashioned healthy debate is really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And we were even talking about adding more of that to this show.
Yeah.
Because it shows...
Because I'm feisty.
Definitely. I'm very spicy. I think that it shows both sides of an argument and it allows people to help make their own decisions. And I think that's something, that art has kind of been lost.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, and maybe it was just the way that I was raised, I was taught to kind of challenge ideas and challenge ways of thinking, and that there isn't one right way to do something. There could be multiple right ways to do something, and you should think for yourself. I think in the world where people are relying on AI to write their essays and it's sourcing everything for them, people are losing the ability to learn how to research properly and to develop ideas and creative thinking on their own. And when an algorithm is deciding for you what you think, then it's going to end up with a lot of people thinking the same thing.
Well, also, I don't know how much you've used AI. I know you try to stay away from it, but the one thing that I've noticed is that AI pulls from the entire internet. So there could be blog or articles written, or any type of article written, that is someone's opinion. But the more that it turns up, so if 20 people have the same opinion and they're speaking as like it's facts, AI will be like, oh wow, like it's just data. I'm pulling the data, and then they will put that into what your research is and say it's true. And if you're not careful and you don't actually cite reputable, companies or data and research, you're actually doing yourself a disservice.
Well, and it's just a critical thinking element of doing something. So it's been a known fact, right? Like, you look back through history, hundreds, thousands of years. Like, you look at a war. The person that wins the war typically is the one rewriting the history books and giving like a lens of what actually happened. The reality isn't necessarily in that rewritten history based off of the victor. Like, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And that's one of those things, is if you have AI kind of scanning the internet for information and then coming up with a thought, like, I feel like when you use that, you're losing your ability to really think critically, and you're trusting information. But everyone knows, in every business and every aspect of life, data can be manipulated.
Absolutely.
And it's usually, that's why the Fed never gets anything right? Because they're trusting the data that they see, then the data changes, then they have, these dual mandates, and they kind of decide what they're going to do. But when your only option is to trust the data can be manipulated.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, AI, a lot of the technology is fantastic. It's going to change the world, and I think it's going to be so beneficial. But I think people need to still grow their muscle, that's most important, their brain, think critically, and really make decisions for themselves. It's the same conversation I have with every one of my investors. I say, don't just trust what I'm telling you.
Yes, exactly.
Look at my thought process, use your brain, agree with me or don't agree with me. Let's debate what could happen, what would happen. Yeah. And if you feel comfortable and you believe in the thesis, let's invest in this thing together. But don't just say, you're a real estate expert, you know more than me, I'm going to invest with you because of it, because that does a disservice to both of us.
Right, absolutely. And it's such a perfect way to explain, I think, what we're talking about. One of the things that happened last night, so last night was President Trump's speech, and he went on for a very long time. It was
one of the longest speeches to Congress historically.
Yeah, it was insane.
99 minutes or something.
I think like three-fourths of the way through, I looked at you and I said, does he have this memorized? Like, how is he still talking? Like, how is this even happening, right? Yeah. But for me, what I noticed, and I think the part of our country that I would hope that doesn't matter where you are on how you feel about politics, or where you are in your life of investment cycle, or wherever you are in your life, doesn't matter. Child, grown up, doesn't matter. The way that I look at what happened last night, and us being able to literally see the physical space, that disconnect we have in our government between Democrats and Republicans, doesn't matter which side, is so ugly. And I literally sit here and I'm thinking to myself, how are these people in this space supposed to be the people who are running our country, who we're supposed to be respecting, that we're supposed to be looking at? And I literally look at that and I'm saddened about where we are, and I really truly feel like there's got to be some type of change. Like, we were talking, I don't even remember who we were talking to with so many people over the week, but about how it would be so nice if people got off their high horse and just took a moment to be humble on anything political, and just looked at topics as like a humility piece and as a human element, and said, man, I think we can all get behind this. Because like most of the time on specific issues, I don't see how a lot of what is being just kind of glazed upon, we actually all agree about. But those aren't the things that we're talking about, because why? There's no excitement behind them. But we need to have where we can like bring everybody back together, and it cannot be this ugly for the next 4 years. It just can't be.
Well, and I think it's not just these 4 years, and it's politics is that way many times. And I think the good thing about our system, and the thing that I've always loved about it and cherish even, is having two sides that oppose each other and having the checks and balances.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important, and having a term limit to where you don't have, like, I lived a long time in China. I know what it's like when somebody doesn't worry about getting replaced in 4 years or being in power for a very long.
It's a scary thing.
Right, especially spend time in Turkey. It's like that in Turkey. And,
Yep.
The change of ideas and people, one way isn't the right way.
Never.
Like, there's a way for the left to push their agendas. There's a way for the right to push their agendas. The way things are supposed to work in harmony is that if you have two people with differing sides of agendas and they meet in the middle somewhere, the American people are going to be better served.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the way it's supposed to work. And it is, disheartening sometimes to see all of the anger or lack of respect. And it was like this when Joe Biden was president from the other side.
Oh, it's always like that. I was just hoping that by us seeing what happened after COVID, like COVID itself, it happened to every single person in the world. COVID happened to everybody. Yeah. So that I would have thought could have brought like some unity together. Like, take your political agenda away and just like look at each other and be like, I'm really sorry that you lost your mom. I'm sorry about your cousin. You know what? Yeah. I saw what you went through. Staying at home super sucked. We all had to do it. Like, I didn't get to see somebody for this amount of time. And like, that is some common ground we all went through. But people pretend COVID never even happened, other than like some numbers that talk about inflation. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, bring some humanity back.
And I think one of the reasons that we've gotten this far this way is I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, there was a lot more education in the schools that taught kind of civic duty and societal duty, and that it wasn't like, even though America kind of gets from the rest of the world looked at as a country with people who only care about money, that's our sole focus. I think that it is important, we teach our daughter, even though she's 8 and doesn't care right now, that there is like a duty to society, like being a good person in the world. Like, when I mentor the young people at Viking and they ask me what's most important, I'm like, look, I want you to try really hard and I want you to be a good person. Like, when you're talking to an investor, you screw up, accidents are gonna happen, use this as learning experiences, but I want you to be a good person. I want you to care about the people that you're talking to. Yeah. And I think with government, that's been lost to a certain extent. A lot of people are, like, what can government do for me? Government's supposed to be set up to provide protection against outside threats, but also to create an environment where everyone can thrive and everyone has their own individual civic duty to help promote that cause and that collaboration that it would take to really be this. Imagine if you were working at a company and half the company wouldn't talk to the other side of the company.
I know, it's mind-blowing.
How would you get anything done? And I think that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah. So. No, 100%. You nailed it. Because I feel the same exact way. And I feel like when we say this out loud, it sounds like this is what everyone, like, it's so simple, and it's like,
well, there's a power.
Like, how is this not what everyone thinks?
There's a power dynamic, and there's mechanisms within the government to where, like, if you control certain parts of the government, that you have a small window of time that you can push your agenda forward.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's going to look very aggressive, but at the same time, the checks and balances are still happening.
But 1 second, because the thing that you're saying is that I love, but it's the media piece that is like brainwashing everyone else. Like, I would love to see a healthy debate inside of Congress, and seeing the Senate and them do work the way that they're supposed to work, right?
Well, and I think everybody can create that for themselves. Unfortunately, like, you have to flip from channel to channel. So if you watch Fox News for an hour and then you go and watch CNN for an hour, you're going to get both sides of the argument.
100%.
And
but
it would be better.
Don't do that. They're like, oh no, I'm not doing that.
It would be better if you had. And sometimes I notice I watch all the different news stations. If I'm honest, the news station I watch the most is CNBC or Bloomberg, because I'm more focused on the economic stuff.
Right.
But it is fascinating to see both sides of the argument. And sometimes I think align more closely with one side of one argument or the other. But in order to make a rational decision, you have to hear both sides. And if you're like, I'm only going to watch this station because this station aligns with my views, then you're really just perpetuating your
But you have to think to yourself,
lack of
why are those
ability to even hear the other side's argument.
But why are those your view? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, if you are it's the same thing in any part of your life. If all you're exposed to is one thing, that's all you'll ever know. For instance, a perfect example is people who've never left the country. I was one of those people who, until my very late 20s, had only seen the US. So of course, like I would just think that this is how everywhere in the world is. I don't care what country I'm in. It must be like this, right? I mean, I couldn't be further from the truth. I was like, what was I, living under a rock? Basically, because I went to China, and then I went to Europe, and then I've gone to South America. We've gone to so many different places, none of which are the same. They're not even close. I mean, country to country within those places, I mean, it's just literally there's nothing about them that are like the US. There's human beings, but their governments operate differently. The way that they believe about things, their food is different. The way they speak is different.
Yeah, what they value in life is different.
The values, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much diversity in just that alone. And so if you're
who you can trust, who you can't trust. Like I think,
gosh,
I have an opposite view. I think of you, and it's why it's great when we kind of talk about our upbringings. I did the opposite of you. I didn't get into the country until I was 13, 14 years old.
Right.
I was living overseas in various countries. And I remember my dad telling me in certain countries, he's like, we've always taught you to trust the police. Some countries, like, they're really not your friend.
Yeah,
and
they're not here to protect you.
They're not here to protect you. Like, they're like, there's corruption in some of these areas. And he's like, in America, you might run to the police officer and say, please help me.
Right.
But in these countries, maybe that's the wrong thing to do, and there's lots of different anecdotal things like that are different, but I think that's spot on. Being in America your whole life, you're in a bubble, and we teach people to behave within our society a certain way, or not behave in society a certain way. And other countries, don't really love the way that we do things here.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it speaks to that they may also not have full exposure to us. They're just seeing the crazy rhetoric on television, which is also a piece, right? Like we don't live in other countries. They don't live here.
Right.
So all their exposure is the chaos that they see on television. So it really does us a disservice when what people are watching of our president and our leader, no matter if we like him or we don't like him, is something that's negative. It was the same thing with Biden, right? People were talking so poorly about him on one side, and they'd be like, oh, this guy this guy that. That's our leader. And whether we like him or not, like that didn't matter at that point. The way that other countries should see us as a strong government and as a force to be reckoned with, no matter what. Like it's like keep your stuff, like your problems in your house, right? You're not going to go out and start screaming at your spouse. I would hope not. I mean, you're not supposed to scream at either way. Yeah. But when you're like, my thought is that when there's the outside perception looking in, their perception is the reality. So if we look weak, then we're weak in their eyes. That puts us in jeopardy. I don't like that feeling. I like knowing that we have someone stable, we have someone who's healthy, we have somebody who people respect. And the last two presidents haven't been that way. Neither one of them. Right. Prior to that, we had that with even Obama. We had that with George Bush. We had that with Clinton. We had that, and there was pieces, right? Yeah. But to the outside perspective, people saw us as a strong country.
Yep, and I think we could debate politics for hours. I think the way I always look at this, and the way that I think it's the best way to look at it is vote for the person that you like. If that person doesn't win, move forward with your life. And if you are so sure that the person who won is going to create negative environments, outline what those are and figure out how you can best situate yourself if those negative things happen.
Right.
If you are so confident that Donald Trump is going to use these tariffs and create a recession and inflation is going to go rampant, invest in things that do well with inflation.
Or protect yourself. Put your money in gold, Like do things, like you don't have the ability, like a lot of people when Trump was getting reelected were like, I'm going to move to another country. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, I've been to a lot of countries. And even though Trump isn't the president of those countries, I don't know that I'd want to live there full time and deal with some of the problems that they have. It's like the grass is always greener, right?
America's still a really great place to live. And I just think that if people focused more on, how do I best situate my situation? And then, like, we used this quote on the last podcast that I thought was really great. It was like, crystal ball, you're eating shattered glass if you trust your crystal ball. So you're never going to be 100% right. But if you truly believe in your soul that something's going to happen, and then you don't do anything about it, you don't protect yourself, you don't set yourself up to prosper during a time where that becomes prevalent, then whose fault is it that you're being inflicted on, that pain's inflicting you? Like you didn't go the extra effort to figure out how to best situate yourself in that situation.
Whoa, you're really, okay.
Yeah.
Woo, okay. No, I agree. I think that protecting yourself is probably the most important, safeguarding you and your family. Then if you have the ability to, then build the wealth that you want in those moments and take uncertainty and make it certain for you. And what's going to happen is going to happen at this point, right? There's not a lot that us as citizens can do other than what you're saying is prepare our families and prepare ourselves. Yeah. What I was going to mention from last night, so we talked about like briefly how long it was, but I think there was a lot of, there's a lot of everything. It was very, very long, but I would say, could you just maybe bring like 2 or 3 points up that you thought were probably the most powerful parts of the evening? Maybe not specific like topics, but like the parts of the evening that you felt were the most powerful?
I think, the address to Congress was important. Mm-hmm. I think the things over the last couple days that had made me think and really critically think about what I think is going to happen, what I don't think is going to happen, is more the tariffs, going into full effect with Mexico and Canada. I listened to Canada's Prime Minister speak and kind of his address to the United States government, Donald Trump specifically, and the American people. And then, going into today, hearing that, we might be backtracking a little bit on some of the tariffs. Like, I really do believe that for better or worse, Donald Trump uses the tools in his tool belt to negotiate. And I think that he's trying to create a situation where, America gets the best deal. He does it sometimes in a very aggressive way.
Yeah.
And he uses leverage. And, you can look at that as aggressive, but I think in many instances, he uses the phrase America holds the cards, mm-hmm. which, when you're dealing with your allies and when you're dealing with people that are your friends, taking advantage of leverage isn't always the right move.
Right.
Understanding that it's there and knowing that you have a little bit more weight in the negotiations, but still giving them a chance to meet in the middle somewhere and compromise and find an outcome that works for everyone. I hope that's the outcome.
Yeah.
It makes me
especially with Canada.
Yeah, I always feel better when I'm on the side that has leverage because that's less risk, and I think that that's a nice thing to have. But to use that leverage to create an unfair deal for the other side, it might feel good right now because you get a better deal, but later down the road, that person's gonna be less willing to work with you, and you never know if you're always gonna have the leverage. So this goes back to being a good person and to looking at trying to find compromises and meeting in the middle. I hope that's our the way that we move forward with diplomacy. But I think that the benefits I could see coming for the entire country through tariffs, even though there will be pain and some of these goods are going to cost more, you're going to see American goods that are made here on a little bit more equal footing. Those companies are going to prosper, more jobs will be created in America. There's going to be good and bad that comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, and in the short term especially, we're just going to see a lot more volatility initially because this is a big change. It's huge. It would be silly for any human being, including Republicans, to pretend that we're not going to see a negative impact in the short term because there is going to be a transitionary period where this is going to hurt. We're going to feel this pain and we're going to feel what's happening. And then I think the most important thing is to allow time to happen to see how things neutralize and then where are we now?
Well, and this goes back to the debate, which I think, the debate between John Chang and Yabawa. The idea of the soft landing. I think what isn't debatable is that we got into a situation with COVID, quantitative easing, prices heating up in many different markets.
Yeah.
And when that happens, the remedy for that is a recession. So the idea of a soft landing is the Federal Reserve and central banks around the world using monetary policy to ease the pain of a recession or a depression and create a soft landing where you're going to hit the ground, but are you going to hover about on the ground, and is it good, how painful is it going to be?
Yeah. Hopefully it's not a full crash.
Well, I mean, two sides of thought there. My opinion is that
I meant the airplane.
Yeah.
I know where you're going, but I meant like hopefully you're not going to fully crash on the airplane.
So when you look at what's happening with tariffs,
yes,
you have all of these kind of dynamics at play that are making the markets do very irregular things because people don't know what to do because there isn't clarity. Is Donald Trump going to have these tariffs for 2 weeks? Is he going to do this for 3 years?
Right.
Why is he doing this? Is he doing this to stop the move of fentanyl from Mexico to Canada? That is what the public line is saying. That's what the administration is saying. But many people think that maybe he's doing this because he wants to bolster the income to the federal government to help pay for some of the tax cuts. You have a lot of people on the left that don't like the Trump tax cuts. You have a lot of people on the right saying, you can look at it as a tax cut, but because we've had them since 2017, if you pull them away, it's a tax increase.
Yeah.
So there's like, and what
Besides
are we going to have a recession if those tax cuts expire completely? And will that cause a recession? Because now people are paying, your average American pays a lot more. It's not, wealthy people get a larger share of tax cuts. But if someone that makes $60,000 a year has to spend $2,000 or $3,000 more on their taxes, it'll affect them a lot more than the rich person getting a $50,000 return or an $80,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the things that are going on, if you look at kind of, is a tariff fair, then like I understand, the point that it's not necessarily going to better service, and there's a lot of arguments against it. But if the negative outcome that we have is that car manufacturers start manufacturing in America again instead of Mexico and or China, and companies in America have a better footing for manufacturing and building out kind of the future of technology, and that's going to happen onshore instead of offshore, then maybe that extra productivity in the United States is going to help pull us out of whatever recession or financial strife that we have. So in my opinion, there isn't a future where the Federal Reserve creates an opportunity to where there's no pain for the overheating of the economy.
Yeah.
There has to be a correction. It's going to hurt. And people need to brace for that and figure out how to protect themselves.
We talked about this, I think, many times on the show, is why we're so passionate about watching the economy, checking all the different news stations and the economic layout of what's happening and really the fundamentals. And it's because we're trying to prepare our family.
Right.
And I think that's crucial for anyone who keeps coming back to the whys of what's going on. Like we said, there's not a lot that you can do, but preparation and having a full scope of what's going on will be the only way that you can truly try to add more padding for yourself.
Correct. Yep. No, I completely agree. And I think as we see the rest of the plans from the administration unfold, I think when we look back, many people are going to look at what actually happened versus what they thought they were going to happen. And like, wow, like we didn't understand exactly why these things were happening or what the agenda was. So I feel like it's all kind of veiled leverage plays to get ultimately the best outcome that we can get for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that is a great stopping point for us for today's episode. So I hope that you enjoyed what we brought to the table today, and we have another conference to get to, so we appreciate you very much, and thank you for joining us again. Have a great day.
Till next time. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.